Before I begin the sneak peek, I've got a giveaway link in the description below, and I would really appreciate it if you entered. So, let's begin. A Night Divided by Jennifer A. Nielsen. Truly, it is in darkness that one finds the light. Chapter 1. When I want the West to scream, I squeeze on Berlin. Nikita Khrushchev, Soviet Union Premier. There was no warning the night that wall went up. I woke to signs screaming throughout my city of East Berlin. Instantly, I flew from my bed. Something must be terribly wrong. Why were there so many? Although it was a warm morning, that wasn't the reason for my sweaty palms or flushed face. My first thought was that it must have been air raid. My parents had described them to me from the Second World War. I pulled my curtains apart, expecting the worst, but when I looked out, my heart slammed to my throat. Not even the darkest part of my imagination could have prepared me for this. It was Sunday, August 13, 1961, a day I will remember for the rest of my life, when a prison had been built around us as we slept. Lines of Grenzers, our nickname for our border police, the Grenztruppen, stood guard along a fence of thorny wire, in some places higher than their heads, and for as far as the eyes could see. They stood like iron statues with stern expressions and long rifles in their hands. It was obvious that anyone who tried to cross would get far worse than a rip in their clothes. Because the Grenzers didn't face the Westerners on the other side of the fence, they watched us. It was very clear who they planned to shoot if there was any trouble. If only I looked out earlier. During the night, I heard some strange noises of hammering, heavy footsteps, and hushed conversations from men with sharp voices. But I rolled over and told myself it was only a dream, or a nightmare, perhaps. If I looked, I could have warned my family in time, just as our neighbor heard Kraus try to warn us. He knew this was coming. He said for years that our government was not to be trusted, that we might salute the flag of East Germany, but not it was really Russia we bowed to. And my father had known. My father. As if she had heard my thoughts, from out in the kitchen I heard Mama say, Aldos. That was his name, and with a final glance out the window, I remember the reason for Mama's screams. My father wasn't here, nor was my brother Dominic. They had been in the West for 2 nights, and were supposed to have come home later today. With an endless row of guns and soldiers between us, the defense just changed that. I raced from my room and arrived in the kitchen to see my oldest brother, Fritz, holding my mother in his arms as she sobbed on his shoulder. He eyed me and then cocked his head toward the window in case I hadn't already seen the fence. I only brushed tears from my eyes and wrapped my arms around her back. Maybe she didn't need me, but in the moment I desperately needed her. She felt me there and put a shaking hand on my arm. "They've done it, Gerda," she said through my tears, "worse than anyone ever thought." Mama had been a beautiful woman once, but that was years ago. She had come through too much war and famine and poverty and to care about the curl in her hair or neatness of her dress. Her blonde hair was already turning gray, and her eyes bore early wrinkles in the creases. Sometimes I looked into the mirror and hoped life would not be equally hard on me. Why now, I asked. Why today? I looked up to Fritz for an answer. He was nearly 6 years older than me and the smartest person I ever knew, next to my father. If my mother had no answers, then surely he did. But all he could do was shrug and hold her tighter as her sobs grew louder. Besides, I already understood more than I wanted to. The fence was not only the beginning, it had just divided my life in half, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 2. You are your only border. Throw yourself over it. Hafiz, Persian poet. I had known something bad was coming ever since the knock on their door Friday evening, 2 days before the fence. We were in the middle of the supper. My parents were discussing the day's news, as they always did. Hatred between the East and West was growing, and Berlin seemed caught in the center of what the world described as a Cold War, a standoff of loud threats and puffed-out chests. Hopefully it won't lead to anything bringing out their guns. Germany still hadn't recovered from the last war. Across the table from me, Fritz and Dominic were debating who should get the last dumpling, the oldest brother or the hungriest, and I was telling them all to be quiet. Then I heard something. Someone knocked again. This time everyone went silent. Papa wiped his mouth with a napkin, and after a warning glance from us to remain calm, he went to answer the door. Though my mother whispered that everything was fine, I was already nervous. Whenever unexpected knocks came, my heart waited to beat again until I knew it was who it was. 8 years ago, my father had been involved in some worker uprisings in Berlin. He had never been arrested for that, and he insisted he'd done nothing to deserve any special attention. But the Stasi, our secret police force, seemed to disagree. Every few months, they came to ask him questions, looking at him as if he had already been found guilty of something. I always wondered if they were waiting for a reason to take him away. This time, however, my father's face widened into a smile, and in a welcoming voice he said, "Her cross." Then he pulled the older man into our apartment with a warm embrace. "Have you seen her eating supper, my friend? Thank you, but I can't stay." Her cross lived next door with his invalid wife. He was a bit odd, collecting stamps of anything that wasn't nailed down and stuffing them wherever that Stacy might not look. He and my father had known each other for as long as I could remember, and had been at the uprising together. Mama once told me he definitely should have been arrested and that we weren't wise to associate with him. But when he came in, she left her seat and gave him a polite greeting. The more she disliked her company, the nicer Mama was. A lesson learned from our visits with Stacy. "How can we help you?" she asked. Her cross kissed her cheek and then dismissed any further pleasantries but had frowned at my father. "We need to talk." Papa invited him to sit down while Mama said, "Children, go to your rooms." We stood to wait here, but Papa said, "Fritz should stay." "No, Aldous. He's 14 years old. Fritz should stay." Mama gave in on that argument and waved Dominic and me off to our rooms. However, I only went to my bedroom down the hallway, shut it as gone inside, then crept back to the corner. Dominic watched me with an amused smile and then did the same thing. "The whispers are growing louder," her cross said. "The government has got to act before East Germany is completely empty." I already understood that. Our government had closed the borders years ago, hoping to stop the flood of people leaving for the bright lights of the West. But there were always ways, though, and trying to keep people in had only made it worse. Another family from our apartment building had left just yesterday, disappearing without a word to anyone. The same thing was happening all over East Germany, especially here in the city. "So you think they'll begin arresting people who try to leave?" Mom asked. "No," her cross said. "I think it'll be worse than that. Your family must get over to the West while you still can." From around the corner, I nodded in agreement. Why couldn't my mother see what was so obvious to Papa and her cross and so many others who felt trapped here beneath Moscow's thumb? According to Papa, for the last 16 years, Germany had been split between the East and West. Our people were divided for no reason other than what street they happened to live on. That was part of our punishment for losing the Second World War. Break our country into pieces so we couldn't rise up and threaten the world again, the way Hitler had done. Now, Britain, America, and France controlled the western half of Germany, as well as half of the capital city of Berlin. Russia controlled the east, where my family lived. At first, it didn't matter much to us. Most people shopped, worked, or visited just as we always had, and crossing the border wasn't much more different than crossing the street. But Russia's promises of a better life under communism weren't happening. As the West repaired its war damages, ours remained like unhealed scars. Their shops were full, and ours constantly faced shortages. They were growing stronger, while we leaned on Russia like a crutch, pretending to be every bit as strong. People had noticed the widening gap between our countries. As more East Berliners left each week, those of us who remained whispered in dark corners about what if we left too. I heard them. I watched as neighbors and friends made their plans to go. My father was one of them who whispered. Our family would have gone to the West months ago if Mama had let us. She was just stubborn as he was, I suppose. They argued about it all the time. In whispers, of course. Berlin was just a symphony of whispers. But this was our home, and Mama couldn't imagine leaving any more than she could, thinking about ceasing to be German. "Choose to go now," her cross said, "or soon we'll have no choice." "You want us to leave the life we built here?" Mom asked. "My widowed mother lives just outside the city. She needs my help. Should I leave her too?" "Would she ask you to stay here?" her cross asked. "Where is it dangerous to speak or to act or even think? Is it only dangerous because you fill my husband's head with ideas he should not have?" Then Mama lowered her voice. This was not the kind of conversation she wanted our neighbors to hear, at least not our neighbors who might report us to the Stasi. She turns her attention to Papa. Besides, our children are in school and you have a secure job. They have schools in the West, Papa told her. We can find a new home and a new job. The refugee camps in the West are crowded and don't have enough food to go around. Mama shook her head. After the war, she had gone for months without enough food to eat. Thousands of Germans died of hunger back then, and that memory was never far from here. We have no family or friends to take us in, and I won't bring my children into a camp. We're not beggars. I'd rather beg than live here. I had left my hiding place and spoken even before I remembered I was supposed to be in my room. But it was too late to go back, so I added, "Please, Mama, listen to them. You should be in bed, Gerda." "What if Aldous goes to the West for a night or two?" her cross suggested. "He can find you a new apartment and ask about jobs." Papa's voice brightened. "I could leave tonight and be back on Sunday. We don't have to decide anything for sure until I come back." Mama was silent for a moment, and then she said, "Bring one of your children with you so employers know you have a family to support." "I'll go," Fritz offered. I knew he would. Last week, Fritz told me he wanted to buy some of the West magazines and come back here to sell to his friends. "You need to help your mother with packing, and Gerda is too young," Papa said. "I'll take Dominic." Dominic came around the corner now, smiling as if he had won some sort of prize. I glared at him, but the truth was, I thought he had won a prize too. Why couldn't Papa bring me instead? I asked Papa that very question when he tucked me into the bed last night. He smiled and pulled the blankets up to my chin. "It's going to be difficult getting across the board in the darkness," he said. "Dominic and I will find a way, then return and show to you in only a few more nights. What if you don't come back?" His eyes became sad and the smile remained. "I must come back, because nothing else knows their bedtime song." He got to his feet and started dancing to my favorite song, "The Farmer in the March," which described all the chores a farmer must do to get his crops ready. "They have a lot to do in the home and in the garden," he sang as he began pantomiming the words. "They dig and they rake and they sing a song." I sang along with him until the very last line, then he kissed my cheek, wished me a good sleep, and closed the door of my room, saying, "I'll see you on Sunday, Gerda." No, he wouldn't, because 2 days later our city would be surrounded with an endless fence of wire and thorns. As I was about to learn, he would never come back. Eventually, Mama dried her tears and told me and Fritz to go get dressed, that we out to see the fence for ourselves. It was still very early in the morning, and large bulldozers could be heard, already tearing down homes or 100-year-old trees that were in the way of the fence. Along with most people in my neighborhood, I stood on the road, facing the guns that faced us. Mama had held one of my hands and Fritz held the other. No one around me cried, and not even the strongest men fought back. Why didn't we? I looked around, waiting for someone to rush at the officers and a cry for freedom. Then others would join in and fight until we overpowered the guards and showed them we refused to be held in here like criminals. Or until enough of us were shot. The guards looked prepared to do that, if necessary. Probably everyone here had already understood that, because, like me, they only stood and watched. Maybe we were all too empty for tears or too horrified for words. When I asked Fritz when Papa and Dominic would be able to come home, he only knelt beside me and shook his head. Quietly he whispered, "Papa was a part of the resistance, Gerda, or they think he was. As long as the fence is up, they will never let him come home, and he won't send Dominic back to his place. But don't worry, I'm sure it can't last long." The people around me had already given a name to this day, a barbed wire Sunday, the day that divided a city and eventually a country. Worst of all, the day that divided my family. The sun warmed my back as it slowly rose in the east, and I shivered against it. This early morning light had not ended in a long, dark night. No, for us, the dark night had only begun.